Born in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, Brittany Coulter has accumulated roots in a number of Canadian cities in Ontario and Eastern Canada alike. Having completed a Bachelor of Arts in Social Justice and Peace Studies with a focus on children's rights from King's University College in London, Ontario, Brittany has gained both a sincere interest in the democratic principles associated with the public library system, as well as an innate curiosity in discourse analysis as a whole. She is now an MLAS candidate from the University of Western Ontario. Brittany currently works as a reference and research assistant for the Jules Leger Library at Foreign Affairs and International Trade Canada in Ottawa. Please join me in welcoming Brittany Coulter.
What I've come to talk to you guys about tonight, or today, I suppose it's still the afternoon, is radical reference in the public realm and the future of academic librarianship. So as a lot of you know, of course, librarians are sort of libraries are at a turning point. There are a lot of different shifts going on with academic and public libraries alike. The perception of the library to the public and the success of the library are inextricably linked to the surrounding political and social happenings that are going on, not only in Canada, but internationally. As such, the arena within which libraries keep is forever in flux, and librarians need to adapt to the situation to stay afloat. But what are some of the issues? So to start off, let's talk more generally about what's going on. So you can see that austerity measures are on the rise in political campaigns and platforms to assess national debt. And so this has a lot to do with money. With that comes a lot of different people protesting against these austerity measures. So you're seeing big groups of people going out on the streets, like in London, for example, that are against these types of cuts. In line with that, in line with austerity measures specifically, there are budget cuts seen across the board. In Canada specifically, libraries are being shut down and having severe budget cuts to make up for national budget deficits, and the social spending is on the decline, and libraries of all kinds are on the chopping block. This, I'm sure, isn't a surprise. Simultaneously, we have seen a dramatic rise in prices of both periodicals and journals. Not only that you can see this within the survey by Library Journal in 2012, how within each academic field, journals are going up in price, but also we have the increase in expectations on not only students but other users on the digitization of information and how to access information, as well as different services. So this is not only a reallocation of funds, but it's a shift in thinking about information access as a whole and the purpose of a library as a whole. So in order to maintain relevancy to our user group, and in particular to the eyes of our funding authorities, we need to respond to these shifts appropriately and justify our existence as an academic library. One way to do this is by responding to user needs and information queries as they happen, and we can do this by incorporating different radical reference information service strategies. So just a quick recap of what radical reference is. I'm sure a lot of you know, but just to get us all on the same page here. Radical reference is a service provided by volunteer library workers to assist demonstrators and activists. It started originally in 2004 with the Republican National Convention in New York City on August 29th. So their mission statement on their website specifically states that Radical Reference is a collective of volunteer library workers who believe in social justice and equality. We support activist communities, progressive organizations, and independent journalists by providing professional research, support, education, and access to information. We work in a collaborative virtual setting and are dedicated to information activism to foster a more egalitarian society. So their goal is to use their specific skills in information retrieval to affect positive change in their communities. This is public librarians specifically is how it began. So their actions can be anything related to reference services, such as, like, it started off going to the streets and literally asking people what they might need information, like what their information queries are. So it could be something as at a protest, like, where is the closest bathroom, to what are my rights if I'm arrested on my bicycle for whatever reason, to, like, who's in power right now and why are all these people here. So information queries can range dramatically. And so radical reference also brings about a bit of a controversy in that they stand without a neutral stance on many cases. They're seen more as a leftist approach, but they try to provide information from both sides. Public librarians are testing new ways to get to the root of information retrieval and services in order to best satisfy the public. Such tactics that they would use normally would include not only pertaining to reference services, but would include outreach services, community collaborations, protest attendance. More specifically, radical reference developed as a response to the political and social happenings, including economic struggle and closed information access, like the example of the journals and how they're more expensive, and how a lot of people won't have access to these journals unless libraries can pay for them, right? So despite this, the public continue to have wants and needs in terms of information access, and libraries can't afford it. So just as an example of something you might, oh, the picture isn't turning out too well, but this is a picture of the People's Library from the Occupy Wall Street movement, and this is just an example to show that it's not only about radical reference in terms of being on the streets at the protest answering questions, but it could also be about readers' advisory and other types of information queries. So what does this have to do with academic libraries? Current trends in public library institutions offer valuable lessons for academic librarians in their struggle to promote current collections and befit their overarching institutions. As James Neal notes, in 2001, I might add, fundamental changes in higher education, information technology, and scholarly communication are provoking a radical revisioning of the future of the academic library. So we can see this in many different examples, not only through protests, but also in just day-to-day services that academic libraries are currently promoting that may not see them as a radical reference strategy, but are using day-to-day. So in 2013, as we can see comparatively, and what James Neal has sort of foreseen, there are a number of changes that have sparked change in academic librarianship, and some might say even a type of revolution. This isn't only within economic standings, but also increasing commercial competition and demands for accountability. So you can see this in new public management strategies and putting more accountability on the shoulders of lower tier workers. So just to bring about specific radical movements that have been happening around the world and how this would have a direct impact on academic libraries, I'm bringing you to an example in, this is Santiago, Chile, but so what happened here is the movement started in 2006 where many students were protesting to gain access to higher education with a lower tuition fees, but the movement actually got really big in 2011 where students were advocating for a more inclusive education system, and they designed a proposal to the Ministry of Education asking for quality, publicly funded, free of profiteering education. The students literally took over the entire school, and not much was indicated in the media in terms of that. But another example, which is more local, which I'm sure you all know about, is the Montreal protests, where students were protesting against tuition hikes in May 2012, which had a huge following, especially once the government put in place Bill 78, which indicated that students couldn't protest unless they had stated beforehand how long it was going to be, exactly what it was for, how many people were going to attend, and they had huge fines allocated to this, which actually had a huge impact on the movement, that more people started going to it in support of them to have the right to protest at all. So bringing it back to what we should be doing, how might academic libraries respond to such huge shifts, or even how might they be working on a day-to-day basis with regular students that aren't evoking such organizational shifts? First of all, the academic institution have the responsibility to their overarching institution. So as is stated within their strategic plan or even within their day-to-day dealings, they need to be relevant to their funding authorities. If they're not still relevant, then, I mean, how are we going to keep our jobs? It is important to maintain professional relationships with these funding authorities, but it's also important to maintain relevancy to the user base, and a lot of the user base are the students. So not only do these student protests that I just demonstrated show ways academic librarians might be of value to students in advocating change through reference services if they were to take more radical reference strategies literally into the protests, but also different strategies that radical reference librarians use on a day-to-day basis could be used as well within academic libraries. So some examples that have already been shown are classroom outreach, for example, when academic librarians will go in to different classrooms and discuss with them different search strategies and how best to use the databases and what type of information that students can actually access in order to write their papers. Others are wandering reference, so this could be within the library, but it could also be within where the students go to study, so within residences or other group situations where people are going. Other good examples are message boards and live chats. So with the change of digitization of information, there's also a shift in how people are trying to access information. And a good way to get that information about to students that are requesting it are through these live chats. I don't know about U of T, but we use like a WebCT OWL in some of our classes where we have to respond to certain comments and readings and things like that. So to have librarians access those websites would be great, that they could be there when the information query happens, literally. And you could be like, how to ask the librarian. Other ideas are newsletters. So for students and professors alike, to promote library services, because some people don't even know all of the things that academic librarians can offer, as well as learning sessions. So these are just some examples of how going to where the information query is happening can directly help these students. Now, in closing, I'm not going to pretend that any type of transformational change is going to happen outside of an organizational structure. And I also understand that within organizational structure, individuals are really important. But as the individuals within these structures, we need to lean more towards leadership. And my pledge to you as current, future, or supporters of academic librarianship to take on the challenge of a more inclusive reference strategy, seeking the information queries where they happen and as they happen. So as librarians, that in the name of our goal to entertain, educate, and most of all empower our user base, we owe it to our patrons and ourselves to take more radical risks.